Your children need a name. The message appeared on Kang Do-yoon's phone during the most dangerous negotiation of his career, or at least what was supposed to be. He sat in the reinforced war room of his private tower overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline, surrounded by the 7 heads of the Kang Syndicate's most lethal operations. The air was thick with cigar smoke and tension. On the table before him lay contracts worth 200 billion won, a hostile acquisition that would cement his control over the city's port infrastructure and legitimize decades of carefully laundered blood money. His father's successor, his family's future, the Daunt of Seoul, untouchable. Across from him, his fiancée Min Seo sat perfectly poised in Chanel, her family's banking empire, the final piece in his ascension. The engagement ceremony was scheduled for midnight, less than 3 hours away. Every major crime family and legitimate conglomerate in Korea would bear witness. His head of security stood at attention behind him. His father's cold eyes watched from the screen on the wall, transmitted from his compound in Busan. His mother's diamond-hard smile of approval, Min Seo's obedient, calculated expression as she waited for him to sign the merger documents. But Kang Do-yoon couldn't stop staring at the encrypted message that had bypassed every security protocol on his unlisted phone. "Do-yoon see," Min Seo whispered, her practiced smile fracturing. "What are you?" He opened it right there, in front of the 7 deadliest men in Seoul, at the table where he was supposed to become untouchable. The photograph loaded slowly, high resolution, deliberate. Bianca Reed, the woman he had erased from his life, the woman he had destroyed to protect his succession. She sat on a worn floor in dim light, exhausted but fierce, cradling one infant against her chest. Her protective gaze burned through the screen. Around her, nestled in blankets on the floor, 3 other tiny bundles, dark-skinned, fragile, impossibly small. His breath stopped. 4 babies, newborns. Their features barely formed but unmistakable, the shape of his own eyes stared back at him from 4 identical faces. Quadruplets. The message beneath the photo was brief, brutal. Your children need a name. They are 3 weeks old. You have 48 hours before I disappear with them forever. B. The room continued around him, his father's voice demanding his signature, the syndicate heads discussing terms. Min Seo's hand reaching for his arm, but Kang Do-yoon heard nothing. The Ruthless Daunt, the man who had ordered executions with a whisper and crushed empires without flinching, sat paralyzed as his entire world shattered around a single, impossible truth. He had children, 4 of them, and the woman he had brutally abandoned had been protecting them alone for 3 weeks. His hand moved before his mind could catch up. He touched his earpiece, his voice coming out as a choked, lethal whisper that silenced the entire room. "Find her. Find Bianca Reed and my 4 children. Immediately. They are not to be touched. By anyone." His head of security froze. His father's transmission went dark. Min Seo's face drained of color. The contract sat unsigned. The engagement ceremony forgotten. And Kang Do-yoon, the untouchable Daunt of Seoul, made his first choice as a father, one that would cost him everything he had built on fear, control, and calculated cruelty. Subscribe to my channel to follow this explosive story as Do-yoon races against time, battles his own family, and confronts the most dangerous enemy he's ever faced, his own heart. The memory hit him like a blade between the ribs. 18 months ago. A charity gala at the Shilla Hotel, one of those glittering affairs where Seoul's legitimate elite mingled carefully with its shadow kings, pretending not to know which was which. Do-yoon had been there to close a deal with a shipping magnate, wearing his polished mask of respectability like armor. She had been standing alone near the terrace, nursing a glass of wine she clearly didn't want, looking magnificently out of place. Bianca Reed, International Development Consultant, the program said, Jamaican, independent, unimpressed by the wealth suffocating the room. When their eyes met, she hadn't looked away, hadn't performed the submissive dance Korean women had perfected around him. Instead, she'd raised an eyebrow as if to say, "I see exactly what you are, and I'm not afraid." He'd crossed the room before he could stop himself. Their affair ignited fast and burned hotter than anything in his carefully controlled life. 3 months of stolen nights in anonymous hotels, of conversations that peeled back his armor, of her fierce independence colliding beautifully with his obsessive need to possess. She saw past the Daunt, past the syndicate air, and touched something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed, the man his violence had consumed. But secrets in Seoul's underworld had the lifespan of morning frost. His mother discovered them first, then his father, then the Council of Elders, 7 ancient predators who'd built the Kang Empire on blood and tradition and viewed any deviation as terminal weakness. The meeting in his father's compound had been surgical in its brutality. No raised voices. Just cold, economic logic delivered like a death sentence. She is a dangerous stain on the lineage, his grandfather had said, each word carved from ice. Foreign, uncontrollable. She will bear mixed children who dilute our bloodline and complicate succession. She makes you soft. His father had been more direct. End it. Publicly. Viciously. Or we end her permanently, and you lose your claim to everything we've built. The choice wasn't really a choice. Doyun had spent his entire life learning that survival demanded sacrifice, that power required ruthlessness, that love was just another weapon his enemies could use against him. So he'd made the coldest calculation of his life. He would destroy her to save her. Make her hate him so completely she'd run far enough to escape his family's reach. 3 days later, he'd summoned Bianca to his penthouse and delivered the killing blow with surgical precision, every cruel word designed to annihilate what they'd built, to make her believe she'd meant nothing, to ensure she'd never come back. She'd left Seoul that night. He'd buried himself in the syndicate's darkest work, becoming the Daunt his family needed, ruthless, controlled, untouchable. He'd had no idea she was already carrying 4 pieces of his soul. He'd chosen the penthouse for maximum cruelty, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city he controlled, every surface reflecting his wealth and power, a calculated reminder of the world she could never truly enter. Bianca arrived with hope still burning in her eyes. She wore the emerald dress he'd bought her, her natural hair falling in loose curls the way he loved. She thought he'd called her there to finally make their relationship public, to choose her over the empire. He saw it in the way she smiled when she entered, in the tentative trust she still placed in him despite 3 days of silence. That trust would be the first thing he killed. Sit, he commanded, not asked. The word came out cold, transactional. He remained standing by the window, unable to look at her directly without his resolve fracturing. Doyun, what's wrong? You've been... This ends tonight. The words felt like swallowing glass. What we had, whatever you thought this was, it's finished. The silence stretched, brutal and complete. When he finally turned to face her, he watched confusion bleed into hurt, then something harder, the beginning of understanding. I don't understand, she said quietly, but her hands had already curled into fists. She understood perfectly. Then let me be clear. He forced his voice into the register he used for subordinates, for people beneath him. You were a distraction, an exotic novelty. Did you actually believe this was real? He gestured between them with contempt he didn't feel. A Jamaican consultant with no family, no connections, no value to my world? You were entertainment, Bianca. Nothing more. Don't. Her voice cracked, but fury was already replacing the pain. Don't you dare cheapen what we... What? What did we have? He laughed, and the sound was poison. Secret hotel rooms and pretend conversations. You thought I loved you? He moved closer, delivering the kill shot. I've had dozens like you, women who think they're special because I gave them temporary attention. You were just another name I'll forget by next month. She stood abruptly, and he saw the exact moment her heart shattered behind her eyes. Good. The more she hated him, the safer she'd be. His family would monitor her for weeks, maybe months. If she left broken and angry rather than confused and searching, they'd lose interest faster. You're a coward, she said, her voice steady despite the tears now streaming down her face. Not because you're ending this, because you don't even have the courage to tell me the truth. She moved toward him, and he forced himself not to step back. Your family found out, and you're too weak to fight for anything real. The accuracy of her words nearly broke him, but he held the mask. Let contempt curl his lip. Believe whatever romantic fantasy helps you sleep tonight. The truth is simpler, you bored me. Now get out. She stared at him for one long, devastating moment. Then she removed the emerald bracelet he'd given her, set it deliberately on the glass table, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she paused without turning back. I hope your empire keeps you warm, Doyun-si, because this is who you'll be, forever powerful, controlled, and completely alone. The door closed with barely a sound. The silence afterward was deafening. Doyun stood frozen, every instinct screaming to run after her, to confess everything, to beg forgiveness and burn his family's empire to protect her. Instead, he watched from his window as she emerged onto the street 40 floors below, a small figure swallowed quickly by Seoul's neon chaos. His phone buzzed. A message from his father. Confirmed. She's booking a flight to Singapore. She'll be gone by morning. Well done. Well done. As if he'd just closed a successful negotiation instead of destroying the only authentic thing in his manufactured life. Within a week, Bianca Reed vanished from Seoul completely. His family's intelligence confirmed she'd left Asia entirely, relocating to Jamaica, and then to a consulting position in London. Satisfied she'd been neutralized as a threat, they shifted their focus to his engagement with Min Seo and the consolidation of power. Do-yoon buried himself in the syndicate's darkest operations. He orchestrated 3 hostile takeovers in 2 months, personally oversaw the elimination of a rival family, and accepted the title of Daunt with cold efficiency. His reputation for ruthlessness solidified no mercy, no weakness, no heart. At night, alone in the penthouse that still smelled faintly of her perfume, he taught himself not to think of emerald dresses or fierce independence, or the way she'd seen through every layer of his armor. He became exactly what his family needed. The perfect heir. The untouchable king. He had no idea that the woman he'd destroyed had boarded that plane carrying 4 reasons why his carefully controlled world would eventually burn to ash. The engagement to Min Seo had been announced 6 weeks after Bianca left Seoul. A calculated merger between the Kang Syndicate's shadow empire and the Shin family's banking dynasty. 2 billion won in legitimate assets, 3 port terminals, and enough political influence to own half the National Assembly. Min Seo was everything his family valued. Educated at Oxford, fluent in 5 languages, beautiful in the precise, manufactured way of Seoul's elite. She understood exactly what their marriage was, a corporate acquisition dressed in Vera Wang. She expected nothing from him except discretion with his affairs and an heir within 2 years. Perfect. Bloodless. Empty. The engagement photo shoot had been featured in every major publication. Do-yoon and Tom Ford, Min Seo and Couture, both wearing practiced smiles that never reached their eyes. The press called them Seoul's most powerful couple. His mother had wept with satisfaction. His father had finally looked at him with something approaching respect. The formal ceremony was scheduled for midnight tonight, a traditional hanbok affair, followed by a modern reception at the Shilla. 500 guests. Every major crime family and legitimate conglomerate represented. The consolidation of everything his family had built over 3 generations. He'd signed every contract, attended every meeting, played the role of the perfect heir with mechanical precision, and felt absolutely nothing, until the photograph had appeared on his phone screen 3 hours ago. Now Do-yoon sat in his private office, the war room abandoned, his security team scrambling to contain the chaos he'd created by walking out of the most important negotiation of his career. Min Seo was in her suite at the hotel, likely receiving frantic calls from her family about his sudden disappearance. The ceremony preparations continued without him, a machine that would run until he physically stopped it, but none of that mattered. Not anymore. His head of security, Kwon Ji-hoon, stood at attention across the desk, tension radiating from every line of his body. On the screen between them, the photograph glowed with devastating clarity. Bianca. 4 infants, 3 weeks old. Talk, Do-yoon commanded. Ji-hoon's voice was careful, professional. The message was routed through 7 proxy servers across 4 continents. Whoever sent it knows our security protocols intimately. The phone used to send it was a burner, purchased in London 3 months ago. Already destroyed. The photograph? Taken with a high-end camera, not a phone. Metadata stripped. No location data, but our forensic team analyzed the background. Ji-hoon pulled up enhanced images. The floor is reclaimed wood, expensive. The blankets are from a boutique brand sold primarily in the UK and Caribbean. The lighting suggests a residential property, ground floor, with blackout curtains. Do-yoon leaned forward, studying every pixel of Bianca's face. She looked exhausted, thinner than he remembered, but her eyes held the same fierce determination that had first captivated him. And the 4 babies, impossibly small, wrapped in white, bore his features so clearly it stole his breath. She gave birth alone, he said quietly. Quadruplets. The mortality risk is significant, Ji-hoon confirmed. I pulled medical records. Quadruplet pregnancies are high risk. She would have needed specialized care, constant monitoring. Yet there's no record of her accessing any major hospital in London, Jamaica, or anywhere else we've tracked her. She disappeared. Completely. 6 months ago, she resigned from her consulting position in London, liquidated her accounts, and vanished. No digital footprint, no credit card usage, no border crossings under her name. Do-yoon's jaw tightened. She'd gone underground deliberately, knowing his family might still be watching, knowing that if she surfaced pregnant, let alone with quadruplets, they'd view her as an existential threat. She's been surviving off-grid for half a year, pregnant, alone. The guilt was acid in his throat. Where would she go? Back to Jamaica is most likely. She has family there, a grandmother in Kingston, cousins in Montego Bay, but those connections are obvious. She'd know we'd check them first. Ji-hoon paused. Sir, if I may, why surface now? Why send this message today, 3 hours before your engagement ceremony? Do-yoon stared at the photograph, at the message beneath it. Your children need a name. You have 48 hours. Because she's out of options, he said slowly. 4 newborns. The resources required, the vulnerability. She's been running on fumes and willpower. This is her last move. He looked up at Ji-hoon. She's giving me a choice. Claim them now, or lose them forever. I know what the family will do. Do-yoon stood, his decision crystallizing with brutal clarity. Which is why they can't know. Not yet. Assemble a discreet team. No one from the core security detail. I want analysts, not enforcers. Find her. And the ceremony? Do-yoon glanced at his watch. 9 hours until he was supposed to stand at that altar and cement his hollow victory. 9 hours to find the only real thing he'd ever had. Delay it. Medical emergency. I don't care. Just buy me time. Ji-hoon bowed and moved toward the door, then hesitated. Sir, if we find her, and the family discovers, then I'll deal with that war when it comes. Do-yoon's voice carried the cold finality that had earned him the title Daunt. But those children are mine, and I will not abandon them the way I abandoned her. The hunt had begun. The medical file arrived at 3 a.m., delivered by a courier who vanished before Ji-hoon could ask questions. Do-yoon sat alone in his office, the engagement ceremony now postponed with vague references to a critical security matter, while Min-seo's family fumed, and his own parents demanded explanations he refused to give. None of it mattered. Not compared to the manila envelope now sitting on his desk like a live grenade. He opened it with hands that almost trembled. The first page was a birth certificate from a private clinic in Negril, Jamaica. 4 names, all bearing the surname Reed. Birth date, 22 days ago. Mother, Bianca Simone Reed. Father, listed as unknown. Unknown. The word was a knife between his ribs. The medical records beneath told a story that made his blood run cold. Bianca had discovered the pregnancy 8 weeks after leaving Seoul, already past the first trimester, already carrying multiples. By week 16, the ultrasound confirmed quadruplets. The perinatologist's notes were stark. Extremely high-risk pregnancy. Patient advised of complications including preeclampsia, premature labor, and maternal mortality risk. Recommended hospitalization at 28 weeks. She'd declined. The next documents showed a paper trail of deception that would have impressed even his syndicate's best operators. She'd used cash for everything, prenatal vitamins purchased from 3 different pharmacies, private ultrasounds paid for under false names, a rental property secured through a cousin's business with no official lease. She deliberately stayed off every grid, avoiding hospitals and government databases, where his family's intelligence network might catch her name. At 34 weeks, complications had forced her hand. The medical report from the Negril clinic was clinical in its brutality. Emergency C-section performed. 4 live births. Infant A, 1.8 kilograms. Infant B, 1.6 kilograms. Infant C, 1.9 kilograms. Infant D, 1.7 kilograms. All premature but stable. Mother lost significant blood volume. Required transfusion. Do-yoon's vision blurred. She'd nearly died. Alone in a clinic thousands of miles from adequate support, hemorrhaging on a table while his 4 children fought for their first breaths. The surgeon's notes continued. Patient refused. Standard postpartum hospitalization. Discharged self and infants against medical advice after 48 hours. Patient demonstrated adequate knowledge of premature infant care, but was noted to be physically compromised and without family support. 48 hours. She'd taken 4 premature newborns babies that should have been in NICU incubators and disappeared into the Caribbean countryside because staying visible was more dangerous than leaving. The final pages were surveillance reports from his analyst team, pieced together from fragments. A pharmacy purchase of specialized premature formula in Montego Bay, a clinic visit for emergency antibiotics when one of the babies developed an infection, a single security camera capture of Bianca at a market, carrying 2 infants in a wrap while a hired woman carried the other 2, her face gaunt with exhaustion, then nothing. She'd gone completely dark for the past 2 weeks, until the photograph appeared on his phone. Ji-hoon entered quietly, holding a tablet. We found the sender's location. Do-yoon looked up, his face a mask of barely controlled rage, not at Ji-hoon, but at himself, at his family, at every choice that had led to this moment. A cottage in Port Antonio, remote, purchased 8 weeks ago under a shell corporation. The property belongs to a woman named Clark, Bianca's maternal cousin. She's been helping her. Defenses. Minimal. She's not hiding from us specifically. She's hiding from anyone who might hurt them. Ji-hoon's voice softened fractionally. Sir, the file also contained medical assessments of the infants. They're underweight. One has ongoing respiratory issues from premature lung development. They need specialist care she can't provide alone. The implication landed like a physical blow. The message hadn't been a taunt or a power play. It had been a desperate woman's last option. She'd run out of money, out of safe spaces, out of the superhuman strength required to keep 4 premature infants alive in hiding. Your children need a name, not revenge, not a claim on his wealth. Just the one thing she couldn't give them alone: legitimacy, protection, a father. Do-yoon stood, his decision made with the same cold finality he applied to syndicate executions. Prepare a medical team, discreet. The best neonatal specialists money can buy, private transport. I want them ready to move within the hour. The family will know the moment you leave Seoul. Let them know. His voice carried lethal certainty. I'm done hiding from them. Those children are mine, and I will not let them die in hiding because I was too much of a coward to claim them. He grabbed his jacket, the medical file, and the photograph that had destroyed his perfectly controlled world. His engagement ring sat abandoned on the desk, a symbol of the hollow power he was about to sacrifice for something infinitely more terrifying: fatherhood. Get me on a plane to Jamaica, now. The cottage sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by thick vegetation and the constant rhythm of Caribbean rain. Do-yoon watched from the tree line, binoculars pressed to his eyes, his body motionless despite the humidity soaking through his clothes. He'd landed in Kingston 12 hours ago on a private charter, traveling under a false passport his syndicate used for black operations. Ji-hoon and 2 trusted operatives had swept the area. First, no surveillance, no watchers, no sign his family's intelligence network had tracked Bianca this far. Yet, the cottage was small, paint peeling, with a single generator humming outside. Through the partially open windows, he could see movement, shadows, the occasional cry of an infant that made his chest constrict. Then she appeared. Bianca stepped onto the narrow porch, carrying a baby against her shoulder, her other hand supporting a second infant in a wrap across her chest. She wore simple clothes, her hair pulled back, her face gaunt with exhaustion. Even from 50 meters away, Do-yoon could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her shoulders sagged with bone-deep fatigue. She swayed gently, patting the baby's back, whispering something he couldn't hear. The infant on her shoulder released a small burp, and despite everything, the exhaustion, the isolation, the impossible circumstances, she smiled. A genuine smile of relief and tenderness that hit him like a physical blow. She disappeared back inside. Minutes later, another woman emerged, the cousin Clark, according to Ji-hoon's intel. She looked equally exhausted, carrying the other 2 babies in a modified double wrap. The 2 women worked in synchronized silence, trading infants, checking diapers, preparing bottles with the efficiency of soldiers under siege. Do-yoon watched for 3 hours as the brutal reality of their situation unfolded. Bianca barely sat. When one baby finally slept, another woke screaming. Feeding 4 premature infants required constant rotation, 20 minutes each, round the clock. He watched her measure formula with shaking hands, test bottle temperatures, change diapers with mechanical efficiency, while tears of exhaustion slid down her face. The smallest one, infant D, according to the medical file, the one with respiratory issues, required nebulizer treatments every 4 hours. Bianca held the tiny body with infinite care, the mask covering a face so small it seemed impossible anything could survive at that size. His children. 4 fragile lives sustained purely by her stubborn refusal to let them die. Around midnight, Clark finally convinced Bianca to sleep. Through the window, Do-yoon watched her collapse on a narrow bed, still fully clothed, her hand reaching instinctively toward the makeshift bassinet where the babies lay. She was asleep within seconds, her body simply shutting down from exhaustion. Clark took over the watch, but even she dozed in the chair, jolting awake each time one of the infants stirred. This was no life. This was survival at its most desperate edge. Do-yoon lowered the binoculars, his jaw locked tight. Bianca had endured a high-risk pregnancy alone, had nearly died giving birth, had spent 3 weeks keeping 4 premature infants alive in hiding with minimal resources and no support beyond a single cousin. All because he'd destroyed her so thoroughly she'd believed hiding was safer than asking him for help. All because his family's brutality was so absolute that she'd chosen to risk maternal death rather than let them know these children existed. The debt he owed her was insurmountable, unpayable. He'd given her nothing but cruelty and abandonment, and she'd given his children life at the cost of nearly everything she had. Ji-hoon materialized beside him, silent as smoke. The medical team is standing by in Kingston. They can be here in 40 minutes. His voice dropped lower. Sir, we have a problem. A vehicle passed the outer perimeter twice in the last hour. No plates, tinted windows, professional surveillance pattern. Do-yoon's blood turned to ice. Hours? I don't know. But someone else found them. Through the cottage window, Bianca slept the sleep of the utterly exhausted, defenseless. The babies lay in their bassinet, tiny and vulnerable. Clark dozed in her chair, unaware of the danger circling. His family. Had to be. Someone had tracked his movements, or their intelligence network had finally triangulated Bianca's location through the medical purchases, the property records, some tiny thread she'd missed in her exhaustion. They had maybe hours, maybe less. "Wake her," Doyun commanded, stepping out of the tree line. "And get the medical team moving. We're extracting them now. Sir, she doesn't know you're here. If you just walk in, then she'll be terrified and angry and alive." His voice carried absolute finality. "Because if my family reaches this cottage before I get them out, they won't be negotiating custody. They'll be eliminating the problem." He started toward the cottage, toward the woman he'd destroyed and the children he'd never held, knowing that the moment he stepped through that door, the last remnants of his carefully constructed empire would begin to burn. And for the first time in his ruthless life, he didn't care. Doyun knocked softly, 3 measured taps that wouldn't wake the babies but would alert anyone inside. Through the thin door, he heard movement. A pause, then Clark's wary voice. "Who's there?" "Someone Bianca sent a message to." His voice was low, carefully neutral. "I need to speak with her. Now." The door cracked open. Clark's eyes went wide with recognition and fear. She'd seen his face in news articles, knew exactly what he was. Her hand tightened on the doorframe. "She doesn't want to see you." "I know. But there's a vehicle circling the perimeter. Professional surveillance. We have maybe an hour before this location is compromised." He met her eyes steadily. "I'm not here to take them. I'm here to get all of you out." Clark studied him for a long moment, then stepped back. "If you hurt her, cousin or not, I'll kill you myself. I've already hurt her more than you could." The cottage interior was smaller than it had looked from outside. 4 bassinets lined one wall, each containing a sleeping infant. The air smelled of formula and baby powder and fear. Bianca stood in the center of the room, her body positioned between him and the children, her exhaustion replaced by fierce maternal rage. "Get out." Her voice was low, lethal. "You have no right to be here." "I know." Doyun stayed near the door, hands visible, non-threatening. "But someone else found you, and they won't knock." "How convenient. The monster arrives to save me from other monsters." Her laugh was bitter. "You think I'm stupid enough to trade one prison for another? I think you sent me that message because you're out of options." He gestured toward the babies. "They're underweight. One has respiratory problems. You're managing 4 premature infants with minimal medical support and no resources. How much longer can you keep this up?" "As long as I have to." But her voice cracked slightly. "They're mine. You gave up any claim when you called me nothing, when you made me feel worthless." The words landed like physical blows. Doyun forced himself to hold her gaze. "You're right. Everything I said that night was designed to destroy you, to make you hate me enough to leave and never look back. Congratulations. It worked. My family discovered us. They issued an ultimatum: end it brutally and publicly, or they'd end you permanently." He took a careful step forward. "I thought I was protecting you. I thought if you hated me, if you left broken and angry, they'd lose interest. You'd be safe." "Safe?" Bianca's voice rose, waking one of the babies. She immediately lowered it, but the fury remained. "You want to talk about safe? I found out I was pregnant 8 weeks after you destroyed me. 8 weeks. I was alone in London, throwing up every morning, and the ultrasound showed 4 heartbeats." Her hands shook as she continued. 4 babies. From a man who'd made it clear I was disposable. From a family who'd view them as contamination of their precious bloodline. She moved to the crying infant, lifting the tiny body with practiced care. "I knew what would happen if your family found out. They'd take them. They'd erase me. They'd raise my children to be exactly like you, cold, ruthless, hollow. So you ran. I survived." She swayed with the baby, her voice fierce. "I survived a high-risk pregnancy alone. I survived complications that should have killed me. I survived 3 weeks of keeping 4 premature babies alive in hiding, because I would rather die trying to protect them than let your family turn them into weapons." Doyun's throat tightened. "The message, you sent it because one of them stopped breathing 2 nights ago." Her voice broke. "The smallest one. Respiratory distress. I performed CPR on my 3-week-old son for 4 minutes until he gasped. 4 minutes of thinking I'd failed him, that my stubbornness and pride had killed my child." She looked at him then, and he saw the absolute exhaustion beneath the rage. "I don't want your money. I don't want your empire. But they need a father who can give them safety I can't provide alone. They need legitimacy, protection, a name. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They need you to be better than what you were to me. Doyun closed the distance between them slowly, stopping just outside her space. He looked at the infant in her arms, his son, impossibly small, breathing steadily now, and felt something crack open in his chest. I was a coward, he said quietly. I chose power over the only real thing I'd ever had. I destroyed you to protect my succession, and I've spent every day since becoming exactly the monster my family needed. He met her fierce gaze. But I'm done. I'm done choosing their empire over what matters. I'm done hiding. Pretty words from a man who's made a career of lies. Then let me prove it. His voice carried absolute conviction. Let me get you and our children somewhere safe. Let me bring in medical specialists who can actually help them thrive. And if I fail, if I prove to be the same coward who destroyed you, then you take them and disappear. And I'll make sure my family never finds you. Bianca stared at him, searching for deception, for manipulation. And your engagement? Your perfect merger marriage? Ended the moment I saw their faces. He pulled out his phone, showing her a message from Minseo. Your family is looking for you. They know about the woman and the children. Choose carefully, Doyun. They're already hunting you. He continued. Both of us. The only question is whether we run separately or together. Outside, Jihoon's voice came through his earpiece. Urgent. Vehicle stopped at the road entrance. 2 occupants. Armed. Doyun's expression hardened. We're out of time. You want proof I'm different? Let me show you what I'll do to anyone who threatens our family. He moved toward the door, then looked back. But I need you to trust me. Just for tonight. Just long enough to get them safe. Bianca held his gaze for one long, impossible moment. Then, clutching their son, she nodded. They came in 2 black SUVs, no headlights, moving with military precision down the dirt road. Doyun watched through the window as 6 figures emerged, all wearing tactical gear he recognized immediately his family's elite security team. The same men who'd protected him for a decade now moved on him like a target. Jihoon burst through the back door. Sir, we need to move now. They've got the property surrounded. How many? 8, confirmed. More likely waiting at extraction points. His expression was grim. Your mother sent them. Direct orders to secure the children and obtain signed custody documents from the mother. Bianca clutched the baby tighter, her eyes wide. They're here for them. They're here to erase you. Doyun moved to the bassinets, his mind racing through impossible calculations. 4 premature infants. 1 woman barely recovered from childbirth, against 8 trained operatives with authorization to use lethal force. The front door exploded inward. Doyun pushed Bianca and Clark toward the back room. Get them out. Jihoon knows the route. Go. Now. What about you? Bianca's voice was fierce despite the fear. I'm buying you time. He pulled a pistol from Jihoon's tactical vest. Go. 2 operatives entered, weapons raised. Doyun recognized them, both Park and Kim. Men he'd trained with, eaten with, trusted with his life. Park's eyes held regret but not hesitation. Stand down, Daunt. Your mother's orders are absolute. The children come with us. The woman signs away custody. You get to keep your life and position. No. The word was simple, final. Don't do this. Kim moved left. Flanking position. You're compromised. Thinking with emotion instead of strategy. This is for the family's protection. Those children are my family. Their liabilities, mixed blood, security nightmares. The woman is foreign, unvetted, unstable. Park's voice hardened. You know the protocol. Assets that threaten the syndicate get neutralized. You wrote half those protocols yourself. Behind him, Doyun heard frantic movement, Bianca and Clark gathering the babies. Jihoon's urgent whispers directing them through the back. He needed 30 seconds. Maybe less. I'm walking out of here with them, Doyun said quietly. All of them. You can report my defection to my mother. Tell her the Daunt died tonight. Park's weapon rose. Can't let you do that. The room erupted. Doyun moved first. Muscle memory from years of training overriding thought. His shot took Park in the shoulder. Non-lethal but incapacitating. Kim returned fire, the round missing by inches as Doyun rolled behind the worn sofa. More operatives poured through the door. These weren't men he knew his mother had sent, strangers. People with no loyalty to him personally. People who'd follow orders without hesitation. Glass shattered as Jihoon provided covering fire from outside. Doyun used the confusion to drop 2 more operatives, his shots precise despite the chaos. But there were too many. They had the numbers, the position, the authorization. A round caught him in the side, punching through his ribs. Pain exploded white hot, but he kept moving, kept firing. buying seconds that felt like hours. Through the back window, he saw Ji-hoon leading Bianca and Clark into the jungle, each woman carrying 2 bundles. His children, disappearing into the darkness while he bled on a cottage floor fighting the only family he'd ever known. An operative tackled him from the side, driving him into the wall. Professional, brutal efficiency, the same techniques Do-yoon had taught the security teams himself. The pistol skittered away, a fist connected with his wounded side, and he gasped. Vision blurring. Restrain him, someone commanded. Command wants him alive. The children are priority. They zip-tied his wrists with practiced speed. Through the pain and fury, Do-yoon heard engines starting outside, heard radio chatter coordinating pursuit vectors into the jungle, hunting his children like assets to be recovered. You're making a mistake, Do-yoon gasped, blood on his lips. Touch them, and there's nowhere you'll be safe from me. The lead operative knelt beside him, face hidden behind a tactical mask. You stopped being the Daunt the moment you chose them over the Syndicate. Now you're just a liability we're authorized to contain. They dragged him outside as pursuit teams mobilized. In the distance, through the trees, he heard the thin, terrified cry of an infant, and Kang Do-yoon, bleeding and bound, realized that being a father meant experiencing a fear more absolute than anything his ruthless life had prepared him for. They'd made a critical mistake. They'd restrained him like a prisoner instead of killing him like a threat. Do-yoon felt the zip ties bite into his wrists as they loaded him into the SUV. 2 operatives flanked him, confident in their control. They didn't see the broken glass he'd palmed from the cottage floor, didn't notice the way he'd positioned his hands to maximize cutting leverage. The vehicle was moving down the mountain road when he struck. The zip tie snapped. His elbow drove into the first operative's throat, crushing his windpipe. The second man reached for his weapon, but Do-yoon was faster. Years of brutal training compressed into 3 seconds of lethal efficiency. He took the gun, put 2 rounds through the driver's seat, and threw himself from the moving vehicle before it careened off the narrow road. He hit the ground hard, his wounded side screaming, but adrenaline and paternal terror overrode everything. Ji-hoon had given him 1 GPS coordinate before the strike, an extraction point 3 kilometers into the jungle. That's where Bianca and his children would be, if they'd made it. If the pursuit teams hadn't caught them first. Do-yoon ran. His phone buzzed a video call from his mother. He answered while moving through the dense vegetation, blood soaking through his shirt. Her face filled the screen, cold and immaculate in the study of the Busan compound. Behind her, his father stood silent. The 7 council elders sat in their ceremonial positions, a tribunal. Do-yoon. Her voice carried imperial disappointment. We have teams closing on your location. Surrender yourself and the woman. The children will be raised properly within the family. You may retain a modified position. No. He kept running, phone braced against his ear. Call them off. All of them. Now. You're bleeding, compromised, and outnumbered. You've thrown away everything for a woman and 4 bastards who will destroy our legacy. They're not bastards. They're my children. His voice was raw. And I'm done negotiating with you. He reached a clearing and stopped, centering himself in the phone's frame. Behind him, Ji-hoon emerged from the tree line with Bianca and Clark, each carrying 2 infants bundled against the humid night. His family, exhausted, terrified, but alive. Do-yoon faced the camera with the same cold finality he'd once used to order executions. Here are my terms. I surrender all succession rights, every share, every property, every claim to the Kang Empire. I walk away completely. He paused, letting the words land. But I keep my family, Bianca and our 4 children, untouched, unharmed, forever. His mother's expression hardened. And if we refuse, then I dismantle this syndicate. His voice dropped to lethal quiet. I know every account, every operation, every buried secret from 3 generations. I know which politicians you own, which judges you've bought, which murders you've covered up. I will burn it all down and salt the earth, starting with every name in that room. You're bluffing. But uncertainty flickered in her eyes. Am I? You raised me to be ruthless, to value power over everything, to never make empty threats. He stepped closer to the camera. I'm giving you 1 choice. Let me disappear with them, or watch me destroy everything you've built. I'll become the threat you always feared, the Daunt, with nothing left to lose and every reason to see you destroyed. The silence stretched. His father leaned forward, whispered something. The elders exchanged glances. Finally, his mother spoke, her voice like breaking glass. You walk away, you never return. You use our name, access our resources, contact any family member. The deal is void. Agreed. And if those children ever threaten this family, they won't. Because I'm removing them from your world completely." He looked back at Bianca holding their sons, at the fragile lives he'd nearly lost. "I choose them. Over everything you gave me. Over everything I was." His mother's face was a mask of cold fury. "Then Kang Doyun is dead. Don't ever come back." The screen went black. Doyun stood in the clearing, bleeding and hollow, having just executed the most terrifying negotiation of his life. Behind him, an infant cried, thin, vulnerable, alive. He turned toward his family, not as the Daunt, just as a father who'd finally chosen correctly. The house in Port Royal sat modest and unremarkable, painted pale yellow with a garden Bianca had planted herself. No gates, no guards, no bulletproof glass. Just a home. Doyun had liquidated the few personal assets his family hadn't, controlled investments made under aliases, accounts they'd never known about, enough to relocate them safely and start over. He'd used his legitimate business knowledge to establish a small consulting firm, advising international companies on Asian market entry. Clean money, honest work, nothing that would draw attention. The first months had been survival. 4 premature infants requiring round-the-clock care, Bianca recovering from trauma both physical and emotional, and Doyun learning that fatherhood was infinitely more terrifying than running a criminal empire. He'd changed diapers at 3 a.m., held tiny bodies through fevers, learned the different cries that meant hunger versus pain versus exhaustion. Slowly, impossibly, they'd built something real. Bianca had been wary at first, watching for signs of the man who destroyed her, but Doyun showed up. Every night, every feeding, every doctor's appointment. He proved himself not with grand gestures but with consistent presence, the hardest thing he'd ever done. Trust came slowly, then affection, then something deeper, forged not in stolen hotel rooms but in the exhausted trenches of raising 4 infants who seemed determined to never sleep at the same time. 3 years later, Doyun sat on the back porch, watching controlled chaos unfold. 4 toddlers, Kai, Maya, Elijah, and Zara, ran through the garden with the destructive energy of small hurricanes. Kai had found a mud puddle and was liberally coating his sister with it. Maya shrieked with laughter. Elijah sat under a tree, methodically destroying a flower. Zara had somehow climbed onto the garden table and was declaring herself queen. "Your empire's revolting again," Bianca said, emerging with 2 cups of coffee. She wore a sundress and a smile that still made his chest tight. "Let them revolt. I'm retired from ruling." He pulled her down beside him, watching their children turn the garden into a disaster zone. "How did we survive this?" "We didn't. We're hallucinating from sleep deprivation. This is actually a very elaborate dream." He laughed, something he did more in the past 3 years than his entire life before. "Some dream." Kai tackled Elijah. Maya tried to mediate and got mud-bombed for her efforts. Zara declared war from her table throne. It was beautiful, exhausting chaos. "Do you miss it?" Bianca asked quietly. "The power, the control, the empire?" Doyun watched Kai run toward him, muddy and laughing, tiny arms outstretched. He caught his son, not caring about the dirt transferring to his shirt, and met Bianca's eyes. Not for a second. She leaned against him, her hand finding his. "Good answer." That night, after 4 baths, 3 bedtime stories, and 1 negotiation about why toddlers can't have ice cream at midnight, Doyun stood in the doorway of their bedroom. 4 small beds lined one wall, each containing an exhausted, clean child finally surrendered to sleep. Bianca wrapped her arms around him from behind. "You did good today, Dad." Dad. The title he'd traded an empire for, the only title that mattered. "We did good," he corrected, turning to kiss her. "We're doing good." Outside, the Caribbean night was peaceful. No surveillance, no threats, no violence. Just a family that shouldn't have survived but had because one ruthless man had finally learned that real power wasn't about control. It was about choosing love over fear. Every single day. Want more intense, emotional stories of powerful men brought to their knees by love and redemption? Subscribe to my channel for more tales of ruthless characters who discover that the hardest battles aren't fought in boardrooms or back alleys, but in the terrifying, beautiful chaos of family and authentic connection. New stories coming soon. Don't miss them. Subscribe now.